J.D. Vance just gave a speech at the Munich Security Conference that is going to shake up the entire picture of global security. Vance basically took his opportunity to attack Europe for censoring free speech, attack Europe for not controlling immigration so that they couldn't decide who was able to participate in their societies. And on the surface, his words mean one thing. It all resonates with the values that we've heard the Trump administration espouse on the campaign trail and so far in office. But the mechanisms that he's using those rhetorics as, I think, are really important as far as illustrating where the U.S.-Europe alliance is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, the Munich Security Conference is not supposed to be about domestic politics, right? That is not supposed to be the goal. Mm-hmm. And he opens up basically saying, he spends 1 minute on Ukraine. He says, yes, Ukraine and Russia is a problem, we're going to fix it, blah, 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 blah.
Not even a minute, one line.
Then he goes right into, but the real threat to democracy is in the room.
Is from within.
And he tackles European leaders to the ground and basically saying what you're saying, that they are, causing mass immigration, allowing mass immigration into their country, and not listening to the people of Europe and being afraid of their own voters. Yeah. Now, what this stems from is a rise, and why he's saying this is there is a rise of right-wing political parties inside of Europe, specifically in Germany in this case, as we'll get to in a second,
yes,
that are espousing nationalist and anti-immigrant sentiment.
Yes.
Very similar to what the Trump administration ran on, and it's gaining a lot of momentum in Europe at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of Europeans are skeptical and fearful of this type of politics re-entering the mainstream, given their history, specifically in Germany, right? Mm-hmm. And so now let's get into Germany, because I think that's important.
Okay.
So the German elections are coming up in a week and a half, February 23rd. And we'll make a video talking about that probably. But it seems like the right-wing party, the Alternative for Deutschland, the far right-wing party, that was basically founded by neo-Nazis and that has neo-Nazis within the leadership, is gaining a lot of momentum. Currently, the polling second place at 22%. Mm-hmm. Now, the Christian Democrats, the center-right party, has said we're not going to work with them under any circumstances. And what they have is something called a firewall, that they're not going to allow the Alternative for Deutschland into government. Well, J.D. Vance, during his speech, says there is no room in democracy for firewalls.
Yes.
Basically saying that the Alternative for Deutschland should be inside of Germany's next governing coalition.
Yes. Yes. It strikes me very much as it's the far right, it's the anti-establishment party using the rhetoric, using the institutions or the values of the establishment, of free speech against them, to tear them down, to prove that they are not what they hold themselves up to be. And of course, the way that they do that is they go to the very extreme and they say, you're not allowing the voices of this extreme party, this neo-Nazi party, to be heard.
Yeah, and Germany has done a lot of work to formulate a constitution that will be resistant and will resist far right-wing ideologies, right? That the members of the Alternative for Deutschland have been ruled by the Constitutional Court of Germany as being not terrorists, but anti-German, or threats to the Constitution.
Yeah,
right. They have ruled that certain leaders in the party are that now already.
And after Vance's speech, Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany specifically said, we feel very strongly about not allowing these far-right parties into government. So even after Vance tried to push for the European leaders to allow this kind of rhetoric, the European leader pushed back and said, no.
And it's lucky that the CDU, led by Merz in Germany, the center-right party, has also reaffirmed that they will not be working with the Alternative for Deutschland. And it seems that when they do cozy up to the Alternative for Deutschland, their poll numbers go down. So that is promising, I guess. But what's not promising is what Vance's speech means for the United States' place in the world. We are now the co-sponsor formally of neo-Nazi parties in Europe.
Yes.
The United States federal executive branch is the co-sponsor of international neo-Nazi parties. And that is that is a really shitty place for the nation to be. As you know, we are the ones who beat the Nazis, and now we're the ones who want to give the reins of power back to them.
Yeah, ideologically, it's obviously like it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It feels so gross. I'm curious about what does America have to gain in this? Because one, I do think there is some level of like resentment that comes probably from Trump himself of how hard establishment figures try to keep him out of power.
Yeah.
And so he
wants to be like, oh wait,
is lashing out everywhere.
If they're coming after you, you must be with me too, right?
Yeah.
So,
but I feel like what's deeper here is the Trump ideology is that the institutions and the norms that have formed the world order since the end of World War II, he doesn't see those as in the U.S. interests. He doesn't see those as good things anymore.
Yeah.
And so I think this is a matter of trying to undermine as many of those as possible. And when you're fueling nationalist parties like the AfD in Germany, or like like in Poland, there's a peace party.
Yeah, the Law and Order Party or something.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to be fueling movements that don't want to belong in globalist organizations. Parties that don't want to be part of the EU, right? They're going to support the Conservatives in the UK, for example, that led to Brexit in Britain.
Right, they want to support the Reform Party.
The Reform Party.
Yeah.
So I think Trump's calculation is that a world where it's not that the U.S. is supported by these institutions, rather that the U.S. is constrained by these institutions. And what that means in the most immediate term is important in regards to Ukraine, because while Trump is interested in brokering a ceasefire and a peace in Ukraine, he's not interested in needing to bring all of the European leaders to the table to be able to tell him what the conditions of that peace will be.
Yeah, the Ukraine is another thing. We'll make a whole video on it of itself. But Ukraine is, Trump has no desire to bring in the Europeans or frankly, even clearly Ukraine into the peace conference, peace process. And so it seems that Trump is leaving Europe in the past completely. And unfortunately, Europe has a lot of work to do in order to solidify their place in the new modern world. They have to charter their own path now. They have to, because the United States will no longer be doing it for them.
Yes, and they've basically been there's a better word than pussyfooting around, but they've been hoping and complaining and like hoping that Trump wouldn't go to this extreme. They've been hoping that it was all rhetoric. They've been hoping that Joe Biden reestablished or he cemented the European-American relationship and that alliance, and maybe Trump won't win the election, and then even after Trump does win the election, they're hoping that he's not going to be as bad for Europe as maybe the signals are showing that he will be. But now, very abruptly, they're kind of coming to terms with it, and so they've set up a summit tomorrow. I don't know if you've seen this, in Paris, where Emmanuel Macron, Olaf Scholz, the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and a few other, or the Mark Rutte, who's the Secretary General of NATO now, they are all going to be meeting together because I think they finally realized it.
They finally get it. And I mean, listen, let's give Trump one piece of credit, I guess, here. Europe will definitely be spending more than 3% of their GDP on defense now. Yes. Right? That is something that will happen.
Yes. The problem, of course, for any student of history is a fracturing Europe spending more of its money on defense.
It's probably a bad thing, right, guys? It's the continent with some of the most amount of war in the history of the world.
Yep.
And now we are encouraging the nation to rearm and the nations to look inward.
Yeah.
There are movements throughout Europe. Macron, led by Macron, the leader of the Green Party in Germany, that truly want to federalize Europe. There are parties within the European nations that do want a more formal European Union structure. And I think that is like the only way to make Europe relevant for the future.
Totally.
I don't see the public support for that right now. We are in a nationalist time frame. We are in an anti-immigrant, anti-establishment, anti-elitism, all caused by the worst aspects of capitalism that have left too many people behind, too many people impoverished among too much wealth, and they're frustrated.
Yeah.
And, that happens here in the United States. It's happening there in Europe. And I don't think that any of these establishment European parties are going to have any breathing room for the next 5 years.
No, the problem with these globalist organizations, I guess, or like the EU, is it's too easy to use the foreign countries as boogeymen.
Yeah.
Right. And so you'll always have a boogeyman to move on to after you're out of those foreign countries. But for right now, they are the easy target. And so these nationalist parties are gaining all of this support on the rhetoric that we are not the problem. The fact that we are tied to everyone else, we have these responsibilities to everyone else. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And so what we really need to do is just cut ourselves off from everyone else. And so that's why I think a party like the AfD in Germany, which has been purposely institutionally disarmed since World War II, they see that, and they see, yes, the AfD is made out of neo-Nazis, but to them it's like we've been neutered. We're people that have been neutered, and they're the only party that's speaking up in favor of strength for us.
Yes, and it's also the great benefit of not being the incumbency. But this goes beyond the last election incumbency that we normally talk about. This is institutional incumbency. The AfD and the far right have been so absent from governing. This goes to every country, not just Germany. The far right has been absent from government for so long that basically it's every problem you ever had, you can't blame it on us.
Yeah.
Right, guys? Even though they have no solutions, even though that the things that they're offering would make things so much worse.
Yes.
The AfD wants to get rid of the euro, bring back the Deutsche Mark. This is devastating. But, people are like, you know what? They haven't had any power. Let's give them a shot. Yeah, that's basically what happened with Trump. I think that's exactly what happened with Trump in 24. They thought okay, you know what? Nothing changed with Biden. The last 30 years have not been good for anybody. Just whatever.
Yes, and I think it's likely to end in crisis. The interesting thing will be, do they get credit for being the rebuilders after the crisis if they're still in power after it's done?
I have no idea. I have no clue. I mean, my theory is any party that happens to be in power after a collapse gets benefit for overseeing the rebuilding. Right? That's what I think.
Yeah.
But I think let's end where we started here. J.D. Vance has come out in support of neo-Nazi parties in Germany. He is attacking the Romanian institutions for canceling an election, canceling the results of an election, which is, it's not great that really quickly, the Romanians canceled the result of a presidential election after they found evidence of institutionalized Russian meddling inside of the information ecosystem. So they're going to rerun the first round of voting. Now, it's kind of complicated because even pro-European parties inside of Romania were like, you shouldn't really have done that. That's not good. But the fact of the matter is the Constitutional Court said Russia basically dictated the result of the election through meddling through TikTok and everything. So the results were not valid. J.D. Vance says that this is a direct assault on democracy completely. And it's that he basically insinuates that the European establishment is what they fought to destroy during the Cold War by ending democracy. And it's very rough.